Born on October 31st, 1896, Cayetano Santos Godino, better known as Petiso Orejudo, Spanish for the big-eared midget, was one of the most notorious criminals terrorizing Buenos Aires at the time, being responsible for the murder of children beyond other atrocities. However, what is really shocking is that Cayetano's violent behavior started in his childhood. Godino was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, the last of 10 boys. Cayetano's parents were Italian migrants who came from Cosenza searching for a better place to live. His father was an abusive alcoholic and had contracted syphilis before conceiving him, resulting in Cayetano being born with serious health issues. His parents were abusive, frequently beating him up, which explains Cayetano's early signs of social mismanagement. When doctors examined his head much later, they found 27 scars on his head alone that his father and older brothers had created. He spent most of his time poking birds in their eyes and killing cats during his early childhood. His violent behavior and lack of interest in education caused him to jump from school to school. Cayetano had no problem gaining the trust of the little ones with the promise of playing or giving candy. When he was 7 years old, Cayetano gained the confidence of Miguel de Paoli, a 2-year-old boy, with the promise of candy. They walked to a wasteland until Cayetano brutally beat up the toddler and then threw him into a ditch. A policeman heard the cries from nearby and came before anything worse could happen. The children were led to the police station, where their mothers picked them up a few hours later. Cayetano wasn't punished since he was too young. A year later, Cayetano beat Anna Neri, a child of 18 months from his neighborhood, with a stone. Once again, a police officer intervened, but Godino was released because of his young age. In 1906, Godino killed his first victim, 3-year-old Maria Rosa Face. He took the girl to the wasteland on Rio de Janeiro Street, where he attempted to strangle her. Then he buried her alive in a ditch, which he covered with cans. Although this was his first murder, it was only discovered when Cayetano confessed it after his arrest. When he was 10, his parents discovered his compulsive masturbation, which was illegal at that time. Because of this deviated and perverted behavior, he was sent to jail for 2 months. On September 9, 1908, he attempted to murder Severino Gonzalez Calo, 3 years old. He took him to a barn where he tried to drown him by putting him in a horse trough, then covering it with a wooden board. Fortunately, the owner arrived in time to save the little boy, but Cayetano said he was innocent because he declared that a lady in black was the one who kidnapped the child. In December of the same year, Godino's parents brought him back to the police, tired of his behavior. Authorities sent him to a juvenile institution for 3 years. He learned to read and write a little during his time there, but this did not improve his situation. Cayetano's parents found him a job in the factory, hoping this would calm him down, but the boy lost his job 3 months later and began to roam the streets and drink. Cayetano Godino was obsessed with fire. He set fire to 2 houses, a brick factory, a station with streetcars, and a stockyard filled with materials. He used to hide while the flames were growing higher, and then, as the firefighters arrive, he comes out of the hiding to watch all the excitement of seeing the firefighters fighting back the flames that are threatening these men with death. When asked about his obsession with fire, he said, "I like to see firemen working. It's nice to see how they fall into the fire." On January 21, 1912, the body of a 13-year-old boy named Arturo Lorona was found dead in a vacated house. Beaten, half naked and with a cord tied around his neck, the police had no clue where to go and search for this murderer. Once again, it was only discovered with the killer's confession in the future. With that, they realized just how evil the child, Cayetano Godino, really was. He claimed to have taken this boy to an empty house and covered his mouth with a handkerchief after tying him up. Then he proceeded to whip him with a branch of a fig tree. When he grew tired of that, he strangled him and then left to go wandering the streets again. Nobody saw him. On March 7th of the same year, Raina Vainikoff, 5 years old, was admiring shoes in a storefront when she started screaming from pain. Someone had set her little dress on fire. Her grandfather heard her cries of desperation from across the street and ran to save her. Unfortunately, he never got the chance as he was struck by a car and died right there on the road. A policeman nearby threw the little girl to the ground and tried to kill the fire with his own body. She was sent to the hospital where she died 16 days later. Cayetano was there in the crowd watching the results of this action. On November 8th, he finds another victim named Roberto Russo, 2 years old. Cayetano tricked this 2-year-old boy into thinking that he would take him to a candy store. But instead, he takes him to a warehouse where he ties the feet of the poor child with a rope. But death was not there that day, as he was interrupted by a laborer who worked nearby. When the police arrived, they didn't have any concrete evidence, so they had to let him go. On December 3, 1912, Godino saw 3-year-old Gesualdo Giordano, and using the same technique he used to fool Roberto Russo, Godino takes the 3-year-old boy to a dark alley. Once there, he threw him to the floor and unsuccessfully tried to choke him with his belt. Then he cut his belt and tied his hands and legs. He started beating him and considered hammering his head. He left the house looking for a nail and saw Giordano's father, to whom he said he did not know where the boy was. He then re-entered the house with the pin and hammered it into the side of Giordano's skull and hid the body, which was found by the father only minutes later. On December 4, 1912, he was arrested by the police, confessing his crimes. He was finally charged for 3 murders and 11 aggressions. The public wanted blood this time, so they cried out for capital punishment. But, because Cayetano Godino was only 15 at the time, the 2 judges decided to send him to a mental hospital. While in this hospital, he assaulted and injured 2 inmates, one in a wheelchair and the other confined to his bed. He had made so many attempts of escape that the court decided to transfer him to the Las Heras Penitentiary. 10 years later, in 1923, he was transferred to the National Penitentiary in Ushuaia. He was a loner, mistreated by other inmates, and was raped continuously. He also never received any visitors or letters from his family. He was never remorseful about anything he had done, outside or in prison. Doctors believed that his huge ears were the source of his nastiness, so they tried to reduce them in plastic surgery, but it did not improve his behavior. In 1933, he strangled a cat and tossed the corpse onto a fire. The other inmates were so outraged because the cat was the prison mascot that they beat him so badly he had to spend 20 days in the hospital. He was found dead in his cell on November 15, 1944. The official reported cause was internal bleeding caused by gastritis outbreak, but many suppose his inmates had killed him.